I worked with Alan when he was chair of the state party, and we did our best to keep that thing going until sort of we got replaced. He went back to work, and I went to unemployment, and so at any rate, but Alan's a great guy. I don't know if you remember when he walked across the state. What year was that, Alan?
It was 10 years ago this month.
Isn't
that amazing?
2009, he walked from Baker City all the way to the valley, and he walked it. He visited it with people all along the way, and he became more understanding of what our plight is in terms of resources and agriculture and ranching and that sort of thing. So I believe that Alan is going to be an asset to us, and I've asked him to come here tonight to talk about the issues that he sees with it when we get to the point where we can take this, how many ever counties do we get? We're shooting for 18 counties at least, or maybe hopefully 22 counties. Take those county declarations to our legislature and say, here, we need to separate. And I want Alan's thoughts, because he lives in that world down there. He knows everybody down there, and he's got access to people that we don't normally have access to. So with that being said, here's Alan Alley.
Thank you. Good evening. You know, you failed me,
Alan,
because
can we get you
when I
and right over here?
Sure.
Oh, did she move her?
Am I okay right here? When I walked across Oregon, I started in Eastern Oregon, and when I would say good evening, everybody would say good evening. And as you get closer and closer to Portland, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And finally, when you get to Portland and you start off a speech and say good evening, nobody says anything, because they're all like, are we supposed to say something? Would it be polite to say something? I don't know. Are you going to say something? Are you going to say something? So it's something that I learned, and I take that with me wherever I go. Tim doesn't do himself enough service. When I became chairman of the Oregon Republican Party, Tim was the vice chairman, and we were in a world of hurt. We were in multi-tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And Tim was my partner and worked with me to help dig the party out of debt. We paid off all those debts. We had payables in the drawer, if you know what that means. It was payables that they had never accrued. It was stuff that wasn't even on the balance sheet. And we worked through all that, and we left them with cash balance in just 2 years. When I was chairman and Tim was vice chairman, it was a remarkable experience. And my hat's off to you, Tim. Thank you for the assistance and help. It was great. I'm going to tell you my conclusion, and then I thought maybe I'd read a little speech that I actually gave in Portland, because I think you'll find it surprising and supportive of what y'all are doing. First of all, I think it's the right thing to do. I think we need more things to highlight the issue of how disenfranchised the eastern part of the state is. And it's not just that they ignore you, it's that they're proactively doing things to hurt. And they don't even realize that they're doing it. They don't even realize that they're doing it. So how do you highlight that issue? How do you show, our friend over here in the yellow vest, how do you show how angry and outraged you are in a tangible way where they can get it? Because they can't hear you, right? Your voice isn't loud enough from here for them to hear you. You have to demonstrate it with a structure. And this is a structure that will drive a message. And I applaud everything that you're doing, and I want you to know you have a friend on the other side of the mountains. We talked that 10 years ago, I did walk across the state, and it came from when I ran for state treasurer in 2008. I traveled all around the state, driving my shiny black Tahoe, thinking I'm incognito, but I wasn't. And I'd cruise into the parking lot in a cloud of dust, and I'd come into a room like this, and y'all had asked me questions, and I had heard all the questions before, and I'd parry the questions away, and I'd hop back in my Tahoe and I'd drive away, right? I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. And when I walked, you'd spend 5 hours walking in a day. And people, county commissioners, city councilors, people would come out and walk with me, moms, dads, kids, teachers, and they'd start walking with me. And in the first hour, everybody's pretty nice. In the second hour, they start to get wound up. In the third hour, they just blow their mind. I mean, they just explode, right? In the fourth hour, it was, why are you still here? And the reason I was still there is we had another hour to walk, right? I couldn't get away. And then in the fifth hour, it was, why don't you come over to the house tonight and we'll have some people over because I'd like them to meet you. And I'd like them to be able to talk with you and share their feelings with you. And it was an incredible experience. And I didn't win, but I grew a lot. One of the things people ask me is, what did you learn on that trip? And I say, I learned that I'll never completely understand. Because I'll never intellectually understand what it's like to be farming a piece of land and have somebody come out and tell you that that stream that you've been using is a navigable waterway now, and there's all kinds of restrictions that are put on it, even though your great-grandfather and grandfather and dad all farmed this piece of property. I won't understand. We were walking in near John Day, the Strawberry Mountains there, and a guy points at the hill and it's all burned up. And he goes, yep, that's my family's timber. I said, it's all burned up. He goes, yeah, I know. And I said, well, why don't you harvest it? He goes, well, it's surrounded by federal land, and they won't let me go across the federal land to harvest it. I could helicopter it out, but it's not worth helicoptering it out. So every day, I have to go by and look at the trees that my granddad planted that were going to be there for me, and now they're all burned up, and they're rotting, and there's nothing I can do. And I don't know how that would feel. I can't even conceive of it. But what it did do is it made me a little bit better listener, I hope, and receptive to some of the issues that y'all have. And Tim, helped me carry that on when we were working together. So if you don't mind, this takes about 7 minutes or so. I'd just like to read it. And it's something that I put together, and it wasn't put together for you, but I think you'll find that it does kind of fit with some of the things we're talking about. So the debate today is not about CO2, education, healthcare, the Second Amendment. It's about something much more fundamental, something that's been the basis of about every revolution in history. It's a fight for America between the economically secure haves and the economically insecure have-nots. Today I'm going to explore this political divide, what's happened in Oregon, and maybe even a plan of how we can do some things. You'd naturally believe that the haves are the wealthy Republicans and the NASCAR deplorables that link together to form this group of Trump supporters. And that the have-nots are the Democrats and all those that believe humans are an invasive species and need to be controlled. But that isn't really quite right. The haves and the have-nots crosses political and geographic boundaries. What do the have-nots who clamor for free stuff from Bernie and freedom from Donald Trump have in common? They're economically insecure, they're scared, and now they're getting really, really angry. They become economic indentured servants to the man. They see no way out. They were crushed in the Great Recession, and they've never come back. The fat cats on Wall Street screwed them, and the government was an accomplice. The economy of the United States was murdered, their lives were crushed, and who paid for the crime? They did. Wall Street, General Motors, and the unions got bailed out. Government workers and politicians kept their jobs and their pensions. The have-nots got screwed. They might be employed, they have a job, but they don't really have a career. They don't really have a pension, they have large debts. They might have saved a little for retirement, but quickly understand that it's not possibly enough. Folks in this room might relate to what I'm talking about. I know I do. Have-nots just about include every small business person, every farmer, and every rancher who risked everything and is now saddled with a mountain of debt, ever-increasing government taxes, and regulations. The government isn't their partner, it's their overlord. They also see through social media how the haves live, jetting around the globe, drinking microbrews, going to fabulous vacations, and in many cases, they believe that they're directly or indirectly paying for that lifestyle. So who are the haves? Well, it's certainly folks that I've hung out with. It's rich tech entrepreneurs who drive their Teslas around in Portland and go to all these events, sponsoring all kinds of galas for people less fortunate than they are, who toil on the lower rungs of the economic ladder, except, of course, for the deplorable have-nots. The haves also, interestingly enough, include many government workers. They didn't lose their jobs in the Great Recession. In fact, they can never lose their jobs. They get predictable wages, really good benefits, and on top of that, they have pensions and economic security for life. The irony is the have-nots have no path to secure retirement, yet they're paying for the economic security of those that work for the government. What does this mean? The country, and certainly Oregon, has shifted from a majority of haves before the Great Recession to a majority of have-nots. We all relate to these issues. People are insecure and angry. The approach to appeal to the have-nots is completely different between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats, they're Santa, right? Free stuff. Yeah. Free health care, I'm going to pay off your student loans, I'm going to give you all this stuff, it's not going to cost you anything, somebody else is going to pay for it. It really is Santa. The Republicans support free, but Republicans support freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of direction, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of doing whatever you want to do to create a pursuit of happiness. So what does it mean for Oregon? I think 2020 needs to be a revolution, not an election. We're not going to win an election. We really could win a revolution. All of us have-nots, timber unity, deplorables, farmers, ranchers, Bible and gun clingers, those economically insecure, can build a militia to literally overthrow the Democratic overlords in Salem. Everyone wants to believe in Santa, but we all know Santa doesn't really exist. What really exists, what puts the presents under the tree, is hard work. And that's the soft underbelly of Democratic proposals. Let me jump to the federal level for a second. The Democrats are talking about free health care, right? Free health care for everybody. If you gave free health care to everyone, and you even assume that we could save money by doing it, you'd have to increase the federal income tax by 55%. A 55% increase in income tax. And then the government runs health care the same way they run Amtrak, the VA, the Postal Service, and the TSA. Nobody, and we pay 55% more, nobody wants that. Santa's a nice idea, but it's not a reality. The Republicans can fill this fantasy void, but we have to be bold, we have to be blunt, we have to be very straightforward and unambiguous in what we say. Think Donald Trump without the liabilities. In 2020, we're recruiting people to join our militia, not vote with us. That's the mentality that we have to have. Now, you may know that I've done a lot of work on the PERS liability. Oregon is actually on the brink of financial insolvency with this PERS liability. I have some good news for the Democrats, for the social progressives, who believe climate change is going to destroy our state within 20 years. They don't have to worry, because within 20 years, the state's not financially viable. And to your point, our $225 billion liability that we've built up is going to bankrupt the state. Now, we could end up being split into three, and I wrote this before I ever talked to you, Tim. Washington, California, and Idaho will be screeching over our corpse like vultures feasting on the carrion of a wolf-killed steer. There won't be a movement. There'll just be scraps left over for them to reorganize the state. For the past couple of cycles, I believe Republicans stopped fighting. We conformed, and I think in many ways we died. Our goal appeared to make the Democrats feel good about not voting for us. And what I mean by that is that you moderate your position to the point where a Democrat would say, you'd ask a Democrat, hey, what do you think of Alan Alley? Oh, I think he's a really good guy. I think he'd be a really good governor. Are you going to vote for him? Oh, no, I'm never going to vote for him. Are you kidding me? He's a Republican, right? So, and if you think about people that have run statewide, myself included, that's kind of what we did, right? We moderated our positions to the point where we were sort of unoffensive to anybody, and nobody really knew if it would be different with a Republican or not. We said it would be different, but there was nothing in our rhetoric that said it would be different. Now, with timber unity, the state of Jefferson, the militia's formed, and they're ready to storm the Capitol. In fact, a few weeks ago, they actually did, right? Voters need to believe that there's going to be a change. They need to believe that we'd actually be different. Democrats currently run the state like they have a supermajority. They do in the legislature, but there's not a supermajority of Democrats in this state. They're only 35% by registration. The Democrats are 35% by registration. All of the rest of us, the Republicans, the non-affiliateds, the independents, we're the not Democrats, and that is the majority in the state. And in fact, the 35% that are Democrats are being controlled by like 15% who are pushing this radical agenda and pushing all this stuff through the legislature. One thing that you need to remember, Hillary Clinton barely got 50% of the vote in Oregon. And Donald Trump did better than McCain or Romney did here. And remember, Dennis Richardson did win statewide here in this state, a conservative Mormon from Southern Oregon. So what's it going to be? And I don't have to tell you this, you've already started to do it. But you can imagine when I gave this speech in Portland, this was not exactly the speech that they expected me to give. So what is it going to be? Are you going to hop in your trucks and drive home? Are we going to cower to the leftists that have done this to our state?
No, we're going to make a change.
Or are we going to stand up?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Are we going to stare them down
sit there, yeah,
and say, not on our watch, not with our resources, not in our state? Thank you.
Get you to answer a couple of questions.
Yeah.
If it were to be that we had organized enough and had, say, 18 counties together with declarations of separation, with your knowledge of how our legislature works and whatnot, how would we approach Salem to get them to listen and put our proposal on the table? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my initial reaction is, I don't know why the Democrats wouldn't support it, right? Why not? Just like take that half and let her go. Because they don't believe that you're financially viable. What I hear from the Democrats is, oh, they could never do that. They're not financially viable. They can't support themselves. They need us. They need the money that comes out of the North Willamette Valley. And what I tell them is, no, they don't think they need it, right? And states like Montana don't seem to need it, and states like Wyoming don't seem to need it. So I think you could pull it off financially. But I also think for some reason that's not what they would do. They wouldn't say, oh yeah, great, let's let them go. I don't have any data that says that, but I don't believe that's what they would do. So you have to organize it, you have to be credible, you've got to get it, you've got to get state legislators to present it. You might be able to do it by a ballot initiative. From what I've read in California, it's not clear that the initiative could actually execute it with just an initiative. You might still need the legislature to act. You certainly need Congress to approve it. There's some odd wording in the federal statutes that say things like you need to have it approved by the states affected. In the past, it's been by the state. If it was just Oregon, I would imagine somebody might make the case that when you do this, Washington, Idaho, California, because they're adjacent or affected, you might even get somebody making the argument that the entire country is affected because you could pick up 2 new senators. And people will throw that kind of stuff at you. The last one that I understand that happened was West Virginia, and they successfully did it, and then they had 50 years of litigation about it. I think you should do it. I think it's a great platform, and we need to move things like this forward. I really, really do. There's issues that you're going to be grappling with, like how much of that PERS liability do you get? When they split the PERS liability, is it by population? Is it by PERS employees? Is it by residents? Is it by who works here? There's all kinds of issues around stuff like that you can work through. But you got to understand, they're not going to let you escape. We have a $225 billion liability over the next 30 years. They're not going to let you escape and not take any of it, right? Those are all things that have to be considered. Yes?
Al, if I need to go over, if you remember, we
Yeah.
rode a bus together out to the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Looking at organic alcohol.
Yeah.
And I explained to you that's probably a bit, because you were all these deer up there, you were just, God, look at this. Well, you made a comment that struck me, and you said we need an organization to get people's attention. So talk about that. Is this the organization? What kind of things do we need to do to get their attention? And I'm sure you're aware that discussions going on around the state.
Yeah.
Aren't they?
Yes. So y'all are familiar with what Timber Unity did and the March on Salem that they did? That got their attention. Now, we had about the worst possible weather that you could get at that time, but it did get their attention. The senators' walkout got their attention. You need those types of things to raise the level of discussion. If you just say, oh, Eastern Oregon, there's a whole bunch of laws that get passed that make it difficult for people in Eastern Oregon, it's like, yeah, whatever, right? We pass laws all the time that make it difficult for lots of people. But by doing something like this, they're kind of going, what, they're mad enough that they just leave? Really? Leave us? Really? Why would they do that? So organizations like this and organizing the counties, the more unified your voice can be, the better off. And you're a long ways from Salem, but strategically getting people to Salem in mass proved that it does work. That's what happened with Timber Unity. You're wearing the yellow vest, and that's, it was for your work, but it reminds me of what they're doing in France, right? The anti-tax people wear the yellow vest. An idea that I had is start wearing blaze orange vests, for example. And if you got Timber Unity to do it, if you got you guys to do it, and everybody starts doing it, you know, whenever we show up at a county commission meeting or a city council meeting, or whenever we're in Salem and we've got our blaze orange vests on, they start to get an idea that, wow, there's a lot of people that are willing to do this. So yeah.
I think what we're looking at, a critical mass of 18 counties. There are 36 counties in Oregon, and if we can get 50% of the counties to stand up and walk on Salem, even with a group from each county, like this number of people,
Yeah.
unified from 18 or more counties, that would make a statement that they cannot ignore. So I think, you know, what Alan's saying is that we have to go beyond. We have to, you know, I hate this saying, but think outside the box, and be a little radical. And that's what we are basically. Most of the people in this county, I think they're probably half of them don't know what this is all about. A quarter of them think we're crazy, and the other quarter believe in it absolutely. But that half that don't know what this is all about is the ones we have to reach out to here in this county. And Alan's efforts on our behalf, if they come to fruition in the valley, are going to be, they're going to be copied by other people with influence in the valley that think like we do. This is a kind of a test case for counties bringing in people thinking ahead and talking about where do we go after we organize our counties. I believe we'll get this county organized, and I believe we'll get 18 counties organized, and we'll get declarations, because the amount of anger and the story that we're telling is so valid that I think we'll get that to happen. So we need to think ahead and say, okay, this is how we're gonna approach this when we get that critical mass of counties together. And I think people like Alan, that's why I told the rest of the counties, I'm gonna have Alan over and talk about stuff in the valley, because we have to be able to communicate there, and we have to get our message out there early on as possible.
Well, and if you think about it, it's like, what's their comeback for not letting you do it? The only comeback is, well, they wouldn't be economically viable. That's really it. So you have to point to the other states that are largely agricultural, largely rural, and say, well, they're economically viable.
Yeah, we got to regress the grievances.
Right.
You regress grievances in the Constitution, it says that's okay.
That's what you got to do.
Everybody's got to regress the grievances.
So when you stand up to do it, and you have 18 counties, they're not going to be able to just ignore it and wipe it away.
Not when we're the biggest county here.
Well, and that's their initial.
Stop one day. You know, they've been drowning us and stealing our. No, never mind. Anybody's controlling the place. But we've been drowned in here in Harney County for years. We live in a floodplain. Our houses aren't worth as much. The housing market plummeted. So what we need to do is regress grievances, and in the 14 days we give them amendment that we're going to take over our counties again. And the reason why is it's called fiscal. We have a fiscal problem, and we can't handle it because we do not have the money to handle it. But we're the biggest county. It has the most things that, we don't need any bureaucratic crap anymore. We need to take care of our property and our people here. We are the biggest county, and William Hines, man, you see all the roads up there, you go up in the woods, and that's beautiful. This guy gave us all a good wage, man, paid us $14, $15 an hour when there's nobody around.
Okay,
Stop.
okay.
Oh, let's go. Sorry,
You're sticking to the choir.
Sorry. Sorry.
No, but that's what you got to do. And I've always said structures drive behaviors. This is a structure. Words fade very quickly. I can give a speech. Some of you may remember a little bit of it. Tim gives speeches, whatever. people remember a few words of it. Words fade very quickly. Structures drive behaviors. And organizing this group and doing what you're doing and highlighting it will reinforce that message, and the words will have persistence. Yes.
Well, it's really interesting. I haven't been to Western Oregon in the route we took for probably 20 years. And I had a brother had a birthday. We went in there, and from the time we left La Pine, we went all the way to Reedsport and then up to Newport and back. And then we went through Eugene until we hit the nucleus of a metropolitan area. They all feel the same way we do.
Yeah.
But they're a silent majority, just like Trump won. And I think now is the time when it could evolve.
Yeah.
They're all hard workers. They're all in the timber. I mean, the
Yes,
timber's
that's
going
right.
nuts. But once you got right down central part of Eugene, because I took Delta,
Yeah.
and I go, this is it right here. This is where my sisters and all my sisters live. And they're just, oh, we gotta take care of you.
Right.
But we're the solid majority, and it's there. It's just gonna take a lot of organization.
Yeah, it will. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm his wife.
Uh-huh.
Our business, we see people come from the valley or whatever, just to come hunting. So, they look on us as their playground.
Yeah.
They don't want anything to change because they wanna be able to come over here cost-free whenever they want to and recreate. But if we made it clear to them that we're gonna have a say of what happens in our area, and, they're welcome to come, but they'll have to, pay for the privilege and not just come and, pretty much think that they're ruling us. I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And how to do it is the,
No, and you're absolutely right, and that's sort of the idea, is that whatever their philosophy is about how the state is gonna be managed, the land is gonna be managed, that's the way it needs to be. And, so I think you're doing absolutely the right things. I'm on the radio on Sunday morning. It's on KXL, it's on Lars's station, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And, I'll be talking about this meeting, on the radio. We've got, the guy that I'm on with is the head of AFSCME's union for the attorneys that work in the Attorney General's office. So, it'll be an interesting discussion. And you should, if you can't listen to the podcast. You stream it later on, because, he will give the reaction that you're gonna hear when you go down there. And it will be very eye-opening, so.
Okay.
Thank you,
Alan.
Thanks, appreciate it.